I'll never forget my first time doing heroin. Like, it literally took me to heaven. By the time I was 20, I was full-blown heroin addict.
And what was that like for you?
I don't believe I'm in recovery. I believe I'm recovered. And the reason for that is because...
How did you even pick everything back up again and start going to college and start learning?
I signed up to do a degree in psychology. I had a newfound lust for life, an obsession, an addiction to learn.
What would you say to people that are worried about their dependency on, say, alcohol or drugs?
20% of people in the workforce are addicted to a substance. That's what the new research shows. I think what they have to do is...
Welcome back to the Laura Dowling Experience podcast. I am absolutely thrilled to have Dr. Brian Pennie with me today. Dr. Brian is an Irish neuroscientist and he's an author and resilience specialist whose personal journey from overcoming a 15-year heroin addiction to achieving academic and professional success serves as a powerful testament to the potential for personal transformation and resilience. After becoming free from addiction on October the 8th, 2013, wow, you have the exact date, isn't that mad? He pursued higher education, earning a PhD in neuroscience from Trinity College Dublin. Currently, Dr. Pennie lectures on neuroscience at both Trinity College Dublin and UCD. He is the founder of Change is Possible, a platform dedicated to helping individuals and organisations embrace change, build resilience and achieve personal and professional growth. His memoir, Bonus Time, details his journey from addiction to academic and professional success, offering insights into his transformative experiences and the lessons he's learned along the way. This is going to be a belter of a podcast and we are going to learn so much about it. I met Brian over a year ago. Actually, we did a talk we were in a panel discussion together. I was like, listen, mate, you have to come on to my podcast. And we finally got together now. So Brian, welcome to the podcast. I'm absolutely honoured to have you on.
I'm buzzing to be here. And the first time we met, Laura, I remember your energy. I says, oh, we'll get on great. We'll vibe, you know. So it's great to be sitting here and having this chat.
It absolutely is. Brian, do you know what? I just want you to talk. I know this conversation will go in so many different directions, but let's just talk about you, your life, and how you ended up doing what you're doing today. A little brief snapshot.
Yeah.
And then also, I think we want to give people tools, don't we? Because a lot of people are struggling in the world today. Yeah.
Simple tools that work, I think, is the key. God, yeah, I bring it back to the start, Laura. And like many people, like me journey started in childhood. The adversity of childhood really built who I was today. So I came into the world, I had a condition known as intestinal malrotation. In simple terms, my intestines were twisted and I was getting very little nutrition into my body. And I was misdiagnosed from that young age and I nearly died as an infant. But the doctors did find out what was going on through perseverance from my mum, insisting that they took a closer look. And I ended up having an invasive operation to fix my intestines, go into my stomach, rumble around and fix them up. But what's quite shocking for many people is that prior to 1985, this was 1978, I was only a couple of weeks old, that infants didn't get a general anaesthetic when they went under the knife for surgery. So any infant pre-1985 would have had an operation while they were awake.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I didn't know this until I started doing research around when I was writing my book a few years ago. So what they believed was it was based on weak neurological evidence from the 1940s that infants didn't experience pain like normal babies or normal humans, which is wrong. They believed the general anaesthetic was too dangerous at the time. It can be dangerous for everyone, but they didn't think they could give it to an infant. They had that wrong too. But anecdotally, they believed that, they're not going to remember it anyway. But what we know today is that the body keeps the score, as that great book tells us. And every time I talk about this 46 years later now today, I still feel the urge to rub the scar on my belly. So trauma basically leaves an imprint on your body and brain. And in simple terms, it turned me into a finely tuned anxiety machine. I was constantly vigilant, scanning the world, worrying, agitated. It just left that imprint on me. And that's what trauma does to people. So that for me set the tone of hardship, agitation, worry. I developed a phobic fear of my heartbeat, my breath, my pulse, just afraid of my own inner world. And it was a reality that was so uncomfortable that I just wanted to escape.
I'm still reeling from the fact that babies didn't get anaesthetic.
Yeah.
So they would have had to have pinned you down then, because you would have been writhing with pain.
So what I found out, I talked to a surgeon that done these surgeries, and what he said was I would have been put on an apparatus like a crucifix to tie me down, arms and legs down. I would have been given a local anaesthetic for the area where they inserted the scalpel, but that wouldn't have gone into the rummaging of the intestines. He said that would have been the worst part of it, you know. And I would have been most likely given a soother with alcohol on it to sort of pacify me a little bit. So crazy stuff, yeah.
My sister's just had a newborn baby just this week. And to think of something like that happening to her without pain relief, oh my goodness.
It's crazy, isn't it?
So you're a highly vigilant anxiety machine.
Highly vigilant anxiety machine. And I remember my childhood, I was always worrying about death. Like my parents, like they like to drink. My dad loved to drink drive. Didn't love to drink drive, but you know what I mean? It's what he did back then. And I was so aware, the hyper vigilance, they're going out drinking. My dad's driving again. 7, 8 years of age. I'd be at the window waiting for hours for them to come home, just afraid he wouldn't come home. I remember the cars would be coming in. I'd be like, I hope that's them. The car drive by and I'd be like, oh my God, it's not them. And I was just hyper aware of dangers in the world. Always worrying, always really unsafe in my body. That was the main thing. Tense and physically just rigid in my own body all the time as a kid. That's what I remembered. And like the area I grew up in, there was a lot of danger in that area as well, which probably played a role as well, but a lot of drugs. So I believed I wasn't going to be someone that would go into the world of drugs. I was smart enough in school and I thought I was going to go places. But I started smoking cigarettes and smoking hash at a young age, and I just loved the way it took me away from the pain.
The pain as in the kind of the anxiety, the pain in your head as opposed to the physical pain.
The emotion, it just made me feel softer. It made me feel lighter. It took me away from how I normally felt. But I was a very curious kid as well, very curious teenager. And when I started doing drugs, I wanted to do more and more and more. And we were big into Jim Morrison at the time. We used to have vigils for every Friday. We'd smoke hash around my mate's table and smoke in the room, playing the Jim Morrison music. And Jim had a mantra that you should try everything once. So he said, okay, Jim, we'll try heroin once. So I'd done that. I'll never forget my first time doing heroin. Like, it literally took me to heaven. Quickly took me to hell, but that night it took me to heaven. And it was like a soft, warm blanket that just wrapped around my being. And I was like, where have you been all my life? And it just gave me this sense of ease, this sense of comfort that I'd never experienced. And it took me a couple of years to get like fully addicted to heroin, but it had me from that first night. It was just biding its time, and it went from weekly use to twice a week and just sort of reeled me in slowly. And by the time I was 20, I was full-blown heroin addict.
Oh my goodness. And what was that like for you? What was life like back then as a
heroin addict? So it was delusional. That's the funny thing about my story. What a lot of people think of when they think of a heroin addict, they might see homeless people on the streets, they might think of train spotting. That's not the full story. That's a very small subset of people in heroin addiction. Most people in heroin addiction are holding down jobs or holding down some kind of structure in life. So I worked throughout most of my addiction. So my addiction was just a relentless grind to keep myself together. But it was a story of self-deception because I believed that I wasn't a real addict, and I was living in two worlds. The world where I was broken and used heroin to numb the pain on the inside, but the other world was the world that everyone else seen, where I had a job, I had a car, I went on holidays, and it was just a complete mask. So I was living in a completely fake reality.
When you got to daily use, were you able to hold on your job and able to perform? Or, you know, when were you doing the heroin? Was it at night time after the job, or was it during your working hours? Or
I was in my job, right? For 17 years I was in that job. When I was 18 doing the interview, and I had heroin in a John Player blue box when I finished the interview. So I was dabbling in heroin when I got that job. I got sacked from that job 17 years later. So I held down a job for 17 years.
What were you doing? What was the job? Can you say?
I can say. I was working in pharma industry. I used to design methadone and anti-anxiety medication for Big Pharma.
What?
Yes. Yeah, packaging.
You designed the packaging.
Yeah, designed the packaging. I'd be sitting there with
How ironic.
How ironic. Pinewood Healthcare. I'd be sitting there.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was like, so...
But obviously you weren't able to... The methadone and the anti-anxiety medication wasn't there for you to take while you were on the job, was it?
No, it was purely packaging. It was purely packaging.
That is mental.
Mental. And in the early days, like, I was able to function with the addiction. Like, I'd get up, I'd take my methadone, I would do a couple of bags of heroin in the evening, I'd probably do a few lines at lunchtime, I'd take a couple of benzodiazepine just so to keep the edge off. But as the addiction developed, it just got worse. And I took drugs to numb the pain of addiction, but it became like a snake trying to eat its own tail, where it began to make my mental health worse, taking drugs all the time. Because...
Sorry, you said there you were taking methadone in the morning time. Was that methadone from the street, or was that from the pharmacy?
No, that was from a pharmacy.
So you're actually in a recovery program as such. And this is what happens, you see, isn't it? Like
I was never in a recovery program. I was just taking methadone to... I for 3 years, I wouldn't do methadone because... it sort of numbs it sort of takes the edge off the buzz that you get off heroin. That's the story that goes around. But there was a big drought of heroin one time where it wasn't around for 2 weeks, and I was trying to buy street methadone. I couldn't get it, and I was so sick for about 10 days of that drought that was on. So that's why I went on the methadone program, simply as a backup in case there was ever a heroin drought.
Wow. So during this time, your mental health was suffering, and how did that manifest?
The mental health challenges for me, it was anxiety is what I say, like I various levels of anxiety, phobic anxiety, social anxiety to an extent, but more that generalised anxiety. But it lived for me, the symptoms of it really were worry was a big aspect of it, but it was so physical. It felt like a voice just squeezed my chest and my forehead all the time. Like I just always felt so tense on the inside. And I'd be in work and I'd be shaking my hands out trying to get rid of the anxiety nearly out of my body. So I was constantly just trying to take drugs to run away from the anxiety or numb the anxiety. That's what I was always doing. Whereas at the same time, it was making it worse. So there was only so long that I could basically keep up the facades. Like, it was crazy. I remember I was working with Dr. Gabor Mate recently. Sorry to name drop there, but
I was going to say, just slide that name in there. Just doing a bit of work with Gabor Mate,
But he read my book before we met, which was an incredible privilege. And he basically said to me, he says, Brian, says, can I say this to you? He says, I don't want to come across a bad way, but you were a phenomenal drug addict. Like, how you kept that going, and the level of work and hustle that you had to do to keep that going was off the bloody charts. So I had this ability to basically get money, get drugs, use different drugs to numb the pain, but I was running out of track. Like, there was only so much road that I could do this for, and I was running out of track. And it got to the stage where it just completely collapsed. Like, people around me didn't see how bad I got because it happened so slowly over time. And it was only when we merged with this other company and the new people in the office, this open plan office, seeing me, says, who is this fella? Like, it got to the stage where the pharmaceutical auditors would come in to audit the company and they'd say, hide Brian in the dark room. We can't let the things. And that was like, just became a norm. But when this new company came in and he says, what's the story with that fella? Like, says half the time he's asleep. Like a prerequisite for getting paid for the job, like, you know, be awake. And they were just like, what is going on? And they kind of thought I was an alcoholic. They didn't know it was drugs. Some people knew it was drugs, but it was kind of like, he's a dipso. And there was a lot of dipsos in the job. So they didn't want to call me out. Some of the management were dipsos. So there was that kind of weird thing. And I was enabled by people that really cared for me as well. But it got to the stage where I just fell apart. And for the I shouldn't be laughing, but for the meeting I had to save my job, the union were called in, all of the big managers were there, and I went in, and my manager was one of my best friends in the job, and he was the main union person, and we went in for the meeting to save my job, to see that because I was so bad and get to the truth of it. And after the meeting I came back out and I says, Wayne, says, I think that went all right, did it? And he says, Brian, says, you fell asleep on the desk. So I literally fell asleep at the meeting to save my job because I was struggling with addiction, and they were all just looking at each other saying, what the hell is actually going on here? So that was the start of the end for me, but actually the start of the start, because finally I had to get my stuff together, you know.
And when you were hustling for the drugs and the drug money, were you just using the money that you were earning when you were working, or did you have to steal, or how did you get the money? Because it's
Yeah,
an expensive habit.
it's an expensive habit. I had €100 a day habit at one stage. So you're talking €100 would have been euro actually back then. So you're talking a couple of £100 a week minimal. And I never stole. I started stealing stupid things actually in shops and all. Like, so I never robbed anyone. There was a bit of a moral compass there, but I'd rob like. I'd go into like shops and just take things I didn't even need, and I don't know what that's about. I never done that. It wasn't a weird facet of me life, like batteries and stuff like that. But I never sold, man. That was just because my mind was getting so warped and so mixed up. But I sold drugs. I literally sold drugs to fund me habits. So I started selling. I always see myself as a bit of an entrepreneur. I remember in the early days we were smoking hash like at 15 years of age. And we'd go to someone and we'd buy like 10 spots, we'd call them at the time. And I'd say, well, if I got a bigger lump of hash and sold them 10 spots, I'd get more for myself. So I remember very early on, I seen the entrepreneurial benefits of being the person in our little group to be the one to supply the hash to the group. So I started doing that. And then, but when my addiction really spiraled in the latter years, like I sold cocaine, like I never... And again, a little bit of a moral compass, and I don't want to justify drug dealing, but I never went to push and sell drugs to people that didn't want it or anything like that. It was always to me circle of friends of the people that were doing drugs. But I'd sell coke to fund me heroin habit. I'd sell hash to fund me heroin habit. And at the latter stage, I sold heroin to fund me heroin habit.
Yeah.
A really interesting thing though as well, and I think people get mixed up on drug dealing and stuff like that, is like some people think there's dealers and there's drug addicts. But I always remember, especially with heroin, like one day, like if I had €200, would I go and buy 200 quid's worth of heroin to buy, which would be, let's say, a gram for argument's sake, and that would last me a certain amount of time if I bought them in little bags? Or would I go and buy 2 grams, sell a couple of bags to friends I know that are in heroin addiction as well and get more for myself? And then the next week, I'd be buying off them same people. So the drug addicts and the drug dealers became one of the same. Now, there's obviously a different level of drug dealer who brings it into the country and puts it on the streets, who tend not to do the drugs. But at the lower levels, the drug addicts and the drug dealers, they're sometimes one of the same. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't know. Like one week, I could be getting a little bit extra and selling a bit. The other week, I could be just
buying it yourself.
Buying it myself.
Were you able to maintain romantic relationships during this time?
No, I didn't even have romantic relationships. That's the reality of it. In the early days I did, like, but once I hit 25, from 25 to 35, to say it didn't come onto me radar is an understatement. Like there was only one love in my life, and that was heroin. That's all that mattered. There was still an element of going out to town. Like I still went out with the job and all that, and there was like a facade of that's what I was interested in. But it was only part of the story and the narrative that I had up there to make me look normal, to protect the addiction. It was all about protecting the addiction. That's what my life revolved around.
And Brian, you are, well, they say that the term is in recovery, but you consider yourself recovered, yes?
Yeah, it's a bit...
So, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's challenging for some people in recovery that say that. Yeah.
I know that. But can you tell us about that journey that happened to you? So you lost your job, you got a rude awakening, you needed to do something about it.
Yeah.
So how that journey happened to you, and then how you ended up a doctor of neuroscience. Because that's quite a remarkable story, because I've worked with people in recovery, in addiction services and that, and sometimes it's a vicious cycle. They get off it, they go back on it, they go off it. You know, it's a really tricky one, particularly with an opioid like heroin. It can literally just take over your body and mind. So tell me about that.
Yeah, a lot of luck to that story as well, Laura. So basically, when I lost my job, that sort of put me in a position I couldn't even sell drugs at this stage. Like there was no people out there who would even give me drugs to sell. I looked as bad as I sounded. Like I was in a bad way. I couldn't earn money. I was €50,000-ish in debt at that time. Drug dealers, banks, money lenders, the whole world had turned in on me, and drugs weren't working even anymore. They weren't working, nothing was working. I couldn't get a buzz out of anything. So I had to do something, and it was the first time I decided that I was going to have to try to get clean, to break free from this. And I remember going to the clinic where I was a registered addict, and I said, look, I have to try to break free. I've lost my job, I've nowhere to turn, what do I do? And they told me because I was taking so many benzos that I couldn't get into a normal detox. The detox I wanted to get into, I had to get off the benzos first because I was at risk of having a seizure.
So benzos, just for anyone listening, are benzodiazepines. They're, used to be known as Valium, now they're like Anzicam, Xanax, all of those kind of things. They are highly addictive and they're very difficult to come off. They can call, they were brought out in the 1960s called Mother's Little Helpers to help women, get through the day when they were just at home minding kids and that. And they were considered to be very safe because it was very difficult to overdose on them. But the flip side of that was people became very dependent upon them. And that's why you're saying that it could have possibly caused seizures if you just came off them cold turkey. So just a little bit of background to our listeners.
And adding to that, the coming off benzos was harder than a 15-year heroin detox. The benzo detox was worse. So that's the level of benzodiazepine. That's the level of damage that they can cause. Because I had to do a double detox. I had to come off the benzo separately. And there wasn't a bed available for 2 months. I didn't even think I'd be alive in 2 months. So against medical advice, I actually done a benzo detox at home.
Oh yeah, sure, why not, Brian?
I know.
What's the worst that can happen?
What's the worst that can happen? So this is the tipping point here, Laura. So 2 days into that benzo detox, I call it not only the most painful night of my life, also the most important night of my life. And I did have a grand mal convulsive seizure. I woke up lying on the floor, blood everywhere. My poor brother was minding me at the time. He thought I was dead when I slumped and seized on the floor, foam coming out of my mouth. Horrific seizure. Ended up in hospital thinking I was brain damaged. It's a big turning point for me. There's a story of where I was in the hospital on a trolley, just broken, sitting there after the seizure, mouth, tongue hanging together. And I was looking at this red fire extinguisher that was hanging on the wall. And I remember having this realisation that I didn't know what it was. I was like, what's that? I know what that is. What is that object? And I was looking around the room and I couldn't verbalise my environment. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, that's brain damage. You've destroyed your brain. And I remember just in that moment thinking, I can't do this anymore between the seizures, the addiction, the anxiety, and now I'm brain damaged. I give up. And I remember lying back down on the trolley in the hospital thinking, I just can't do this anymore. I'm done with this. It wasn't suicidal. It was just like, the fight is over. I'm done. And I felt this sense of peace. And I truly believe that was the turning point in my life. It was the first time I stopped fighting anxiety, stopped fighting with my own mind. I didn't have the words at the time, but it was a moment of surrender, a moment of letting go. And it was like after that, I was so physically and mentally broken at that stage, but it was the brokenness. I had to fall down before I could get back up. But in the weeks that followed, and I started getting back up, there was a mindset within me that I knew I could never do drugs again, and a curiosity of what had actually gone on. And by the time I landed in a heroin detox, a little farm on the outskirts of Dublin, there was this voice in my head saying, you might have a life again. And I remember thinking, what's going on? How am I starting to feel a little bit better? What's going on here? And when I went to the detox centre, I had this energy, this curiosity. I'd even say this presence, Laura. It was just like, if I could go back to any time in my life to experience it, I would go back to that time because I felt the most alive I'd ever felt. Now, I think it was an element of my brain turning back on, me emotions coming back on. I was like waking up for the first time in 15 years because I just numbed myself for so long. But it was just a phenomenal experience, despite the fact I was physically in a lot of pain because I was coming off 15 years of heroin. But there was moments within that were just the best experiences of my life, which is a crazy paradoxical thing to say. But a woman called Professor Johanna Ivers was doing a big study on long-term methadone use at the time. She came into the detox facility and brought me into a brain scanner. And when I was doing the psychometric testing, she made a little comment saying, God, you have a sharp mind. And I was like, wow, if a professor of Trinity College is saying I have a sharp mind, maybe I'm not brain damaged. Maybe I could even go to college and study this stuff. So roll on. A couple of months later, I signed up for a degree to do a degree in psychology straight away. I had a newfound lust for life, an obsession, an addiction to learn. And
instead, you've replaced one addiction
with the other. Yeah, just the consequences are different. And
Chris Conley said the same thing. He's just replaced his addiction with exercise.
With exercise, yeah. And you need to be careful. You need to have an awareness around that as well. But something shifted within that. And a beautiful part of that story, 5 years later, Johanna gave me a job teaching the neuroscience of addiction in Trinity College. So
this is crazy.
Crazy. But that set the tone, obviously, for me being interested in the brain, being in the scanner, and it grew from there. Just this drive to learn. I wanted to know, why was I so broken mentally and emotionally? Why did I now feel so good? And how could I share this and give this to other people? I haven't found that secret sauce. Like, I think it's something spiritual, to be quite honest. I don't know what it is. A lot of luck. I had support from my family. My family are just amazing. The connection and I had, the unconditional love that they gave me, set the foundations. And that was the journey. That was the start of the journey right there.
So how did you find coming? I suppose, so you came off heroin and you were on methadone for how long?
Methadone for 12 years.
For 12 years, okay.
Yeah.
So during that time, how did you even, I suppose, pick everything back up again and start going to college and start learning? How quickly did that happen?
I went into detox in September 2013. So I was 6 weeks in a detox facility. Then they sent me to a treatment facility down in Wexford. And whatever happened to me happened in detox. Something shifted spiritually, mentally, emotionally. The shift happened in the detox facility. I went to treatment, but because I was so alive with life, they seen me as sort of broken, hypermanic. Actually, throw another name out there, but Dr. Anna Lemke, who was one of my favourite people in the world of addiction, she actually read my book and she says it was like you were hypermanic, and that says that would have been some come down if you were hypermanic, because I was so manic. But I was so full of life because I was given this second chance at living. I couldn't believe it. But they thought I was really struggling with my mind, and they sent me to a secondary detox facility or secondary treatment centre up in Navan. But I just knew fundamentally, no, this is real. This is I feel incredible. I feel strong. I can do this. So I left after 5 days and started to find out, when can I go to college to study this stuff. So by March that year, the following year, a couple of months later, I was signing up to do a degree in Maynooth University for psychology. And I had this crazy belief. Like, I often think there's a thin line between self-belief and self-delusion. And I was delusional for years, very delusional for years. But this delusion gave me the belief that I could go on and kick ass in college, even though there was no evidence for that. There was no evidence at all for that.
Leaving cert?
I done my leaving cert, yeah.
Okay.
And there was smarts there. Like, I got a decent leaving cert, in fairness. But I never wrote anything like to go and do an assignment. But I remember doing the interview to do the degree in psychology. It was the only degree in psychology left in Ireland, because I left it so late. You would have had to apply the year before. And I remember the guy giving me the interview in Maynooth University, and he says, Brian, I think it'd be better if you just go on an access course for the year, and then when you come back the following year, you might be able to cope better. And I remember saying, I'm not coming here to cope. I'm coming here to kick ass. I'm coming here to be the best. And I'm not in a way just to beat everybody, but I'm here to really perform. And he was really taken aback by that. And he says, you know what, we'll give you a 2-week writing course, and if you pass that, we'll let you into college. And I got a bit of an awakening when I done the 2-week course, because it says, wow, I don't know how to write. It's a lot of work to do here. But I doubled down on that, and I just had a drive, a thirst to learn, but a willingness to put the action in. And I put the action in, and I didn't know how to write, but I learned how to write, and I built it from the bottom up. I went on to write my book. I went on to publish academic papers, but that was the start of the journey of realising there was a lot of work to put in, but I was willing to go there. And the look I talk about is just this, whatever came into my life, this energy, this hunger to learn and to make up for time, I suppose. That's what I feel very grateful for.
And how did you finance all of this? Because it was obviously, this wouldn't have been free, this education, would it have been? Or did you get a grant? Or
So funnily enough, the only way I could have done it was I would have having to get some kind of allowance, like a back to education allowance was the one available to me. And it's a funny story with that, because I went to Citizens and Voice, and they says, yeah, you'll be eligible. But when I went to apply after I got into the college, and I went to cross the T's and dot the I's, they says, oh no, sorry, they made a mistake, you missed it by 5 days. And I says, well, Citizens Advice Time says, sorry, there's nothing we can do. And I kept going back into the education, the social welfare office in Blanchardstown. I says, look, is there anything you can do? Like, I can't go to college. Everything is set up. I was in addiction for years. I was trying to sell them the story. And I remember the guy behind the desk, he was one of the managers in there, and he says, look, the president of the United States couldn't get this. There's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied on this. And I remember I went in one more time and I asked to see someone, and this same fella came out exasperated when he seen me. He says, "You again, I don't believe it." And I just says, "Look, is there anything you can do?" I was trying to see politicians. I was trying to get someone to make a decision. I remember, I never forget, he was going for his lunch, obviously because he had a Sambo in his hand. And he looks down at his Sambo and looks up and he says, "You know what, you're lucky day, I'll get this sorted for you." So a rumbling tummy got me the back to education allowance. I'm absolutely convinced of it. And then I had to work part-time. So I was probably working every weekend day while I was doing a full-time college course. And I was working in a place called Camille. Now they do the Thai restaurants.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Early days when you had to wear the pink dicky bow.
Yeah.
So first 3 years driving around, pink dicky bow, €6 an hour, driving around Blanchardstown at weekends. So a lot of work, a lot of hardship, a lot of challenges. But a big shift for me, Laura, was that I remember recognising that, and with the books I was reading, I was on this journey that I realised that the hardships of life, that's where the gold is, you
100%.
know? Really is. And I remember leaning into that. And while I was driving around for those 3 years delivering food, I done the maths on this. It was about 3,000 hours of driving around because it was 4 or 5 nights a week sometimes to get me the money to put me through college, pay the bills and pay back the debts and stuff like that as well. But it turned into about 3,000 to 4,000 hours of audio learning because I had that obsession with learning. And that's some of the stuff that I use more than my academic experience to build the programs that I deliver to corporates today, you know?
Yeah, it is amazing where you can find those little bits of time to actually do that self-learning. So the big thing that people are struggling with today is just, I suppose, I don't know, people are struggling with all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And there's an onslaught. So with your background and with all the stuff that you've learned and with your neuroscience doctorate, how can we help people today? Like, what are you seeing out there? What are people telling you? What should they be doing to help themselves? And, you know, people struggle with all kinds of things, with parenting, with jobs, with addiction, with health, with pain on a regular basis. So what would you say are the simple tools that you could give people today?
I think at its core, I think what's going on is people's nervous systems are overwhelmed. And I think that's what's going on. And I think what people have to understand, there's an evolutionary mismatch with the biology we have today and the world we live in. Like, we've evolved over millions of years, and in the blink of an eye, we have cities, we have computers, we have emails, we have TikTok, we have Instagram, we have activities for kids Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We are overwhelmed with stimuli, overwhelmed with information, overwhelmed with choices, overwhelmed by the busyness of the world. We can be contacted at nearly every time of the day, and our nervous systems are overwhelmed. Like, we're looking at neurodiversity, we're looking at ADHD, increase in depression, anxiety. No wonder with the amount of information overload and the amount of stimuli that's coming into the world. So I think, in essence, our nervous systems are overwhelmed. So I think people need to take an audit of their life and say, right, what are the things that are overwhelming my life? Like, and it's really difficult because I have all of this knowledge. I know the biology, I know the tools and tactics, and I consider myself quite aware because of the challenges I've been around. 2024 for me, I picked a theme for the year, and it was pulling back so I can spend more time with family, more time on health, more time doing things. Now, I've gotten a few brilliant opportunities in 2024, but I said yes to too many things, and it was quite an overwhelming year. I've managed it because of the tools I have, but 2025, the theme for me is I'm really pulling back.
And you're going to say no.
I'm going to say no. That's the key. Saying no to things. And I've already been saying no to loads of things because it's setting myself up for 2025.
That's so important. And I feel the same because I'm, always just doing. And sometimes you just need to go, I am absolutely exhausted. And when it says saying no, if you say yes to a meeting with somebody, you're probably saying no to a workout. If you're saying yes to some other work thing that seems like a great thing and you're going to it, you're probably saying no to eating a healthy meal and you're eating bloody protein bars on the go or something like that. So you've got to think about it from that perspective as well. So when I'm thinking about saying no to things,
I want to be saying yes to spending quality time with family, making memories, exercise, hiking, spending time in nature, eating quality food, cooking, the things that are going to serve me. And people are always looking for this magic wand. What's the magic wand? What's this tip that people have and I don't know about? With the rise of the internet, if there's a magic wand out there, you will know about it. There's no one keeping magic wands to themselves out there. It's connection with other people. Exercise. If exercise was a drug, we'd say it's too good to be true. Get some movement into your life. Something I've
You're pretty
heard.
ripped there, actually. You must work out, do you?
I was doing the high rocks, but do you know what? Do you know what it is?
I actually asked Brian, could we do a workout after the podcast? But I'd asked him weeks ago, and I kind of forgot about it, so I didn't turn up my workout. And he goes, "Jesus, are we still doing a workout? Because my knees banjoed."
and there's overworking out.
High rocks, CrossFit, all this. Can we just call it working out?
Working out, I know. It's the new fad, isn't it?
I know. But it's whatever keeps people moving and going, and it doesn't fucking matter really what it is. And group sports is essential for a lot of people.
Definitely.
You know?
Definitely. And one of the things, like, you often hear people saying, oh, movement, exercise, whatever it is great for your mental health. That's one way of looking at it. But another way I look at it is, I'd say, a lack of movement can drive mental health challenges. Again, back to evolution. We evolved to hunt, forage and move. All of a sudden, we're on scooters. We're not even climbing the stairs. We're going up escalators if they're there. We're going up lifts. We're sitting in comfy cars with heated steering wheels. I have one myself, so I'm not giving out about it. It's nice. But it's like there's a comfort crisis going on. Like there's too much comfort. We're not walking, we're not running, we're not moving. And it's that lack of movement. We're not built for that. So we've got to get some kind of movement, whether it's strength training, whether it's running, whether it's walking, whether it's hiking. Get that into your life in some kind of a way. That is absolutely critical.
Every day?
Every day if you can. I try to work out at least 5 or 6 times a week. But I think the key for people as well, because people are like, geez, I haven't got time to work out once a week. How would I get work out twice a week? But like a workout could be going for a 20-minute walk. Go have a phone call while you're walking. Like, make it applicable and doable within your life. Like, there's no, especially with New Year resolutions and stuff like that, people might plan, I'm going to do 3 10K runs a week. I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes every morning. I'm going to start reading books, join a gym. They get to Tuesday on the 3rd of January and everything goes to pot. Make it simple. Baby steps and build for there, but make it work into your life. And that's the key.
It absolutely is. And I'm one of those people that really needs exercise for my brain, otherwise I turn into a very grumpy woman to live with. But also obviously it's really good for my physical health, and I do it actually so I can, be alive and independent when I'm in my 80s and wipe my own bottom and tie my own shoelaces and all of that good stuff, as well as holidaying around the world. I'm convinced that's what I'm going to be doing too. But I'm very busy running your own business, bringing up a family and all the rest. So I do it at home. So like this morning, say, I got up at 6. Now, sometimes if I don't sleep well, I can't do it at that early in the morning. But I got up at 6 and did half an hour of like just a body weight workout. I also have dumbbells as well that I can use. Just do an online quick session. And you can do a 45-minute or you can do a 30-minute or you can do a 10-minute. If you're doing something, you feel good. I just always find that afterwards, I'm like, I'm so glad I did that. Like I'm set up for the day. Whereas if I leave it till the afternoon, I'm like, oh God, I'm too tired. Or I leave it to the evening. Like you're often too tired. But it's about building it into the day so it suits you. Go for a walk in your lunch break, like you say. Just do something. We are built for movement, aren't we?
We're built for movement, and I think there's goals, there's mental wins in that as well. Like when you get it in, you feel just much better, but it also de-stresses you as well, and you're more likely to make better decisions because you feel freer as well. So where some people to saying they're too busy to exercise, if they actually got a bit of exercise in, there's probably 2 or 3 out of 6 things that they don't need to do, and they'll have more clarity around that as well. So for me, I say to people I've worked with as well, I have it in my diary, like what you call it, if I'm not prioritising things, the most important things, which for me are health-based things, I'll put it in my diary, a meeting with the CEO. And I am the CEO, I'm the founder of my own company. It's the most important thing, but I put it in the calendar and I'm setting the tone of the importance of that. I have a meeting with the CEO this morning, the most important thing in my calendar, because exercise for me is the domino that knocks down many of the other dominoes because it makes me feel better, it makes me think better, it makes me more enthusiastic and energy, and that's what drives the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So exercise, one thing. What's the next thing?
So I sort of think breathe, move, connect. They're sort of the three levers that I think of. So breath work, I often talk about, like as you mentioned, I don't believe I'm in recovery. I believe I'm recovered. And the reason for that is because anxiety and panic attacks drove my entire addiction. I didn't have an addiction. They were symptoms of an underlying problem, which was panic attacks and anxiety.
So you were effectively self-medicating from an early age,
That's
and then the drugs took over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never got the anaesthetic as an infant. Found an anaesthetic when I was 16 years of age.
Okay.
That's literally what it was. I found my anaesthetic that I never got, and I medicated with that for nearly 20 years. So for me, changing my relationship with anxiety was absolutely key. I love anxiety today, Laura. That's a mad thing to say.
What?
Because I nearly do enjoy the sensations of anxiety. It's really crazy. I've changed my association with it because anxiety has taught me so much, because that was the number one thing that I learned. That was the driver of all my addictions. But now that I have strategies to reduce anxiety, I've realised it's the kryptonite that became my superpower. And all of a sudden I've realised, wow, I can do that with loads of things in life. So I've had loads of other challenges, but I'm saying, where's the growth in the challenge? Like, I don't like the word resilience. I like to talk about beyond resilience, which I believe is using adversity as fuel to learn and grow. And anxiety gave me a lever to realise that about other things in life. But the reason why I manage anxiety so well, if I feel a bit anxious, go for a run. That's one of the things I can do. But there's a breathing technique, and it's very simple. It's just increasing the out breath versus the in breath. So maybe 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And if you do that at a nervous system level, what you're doing is increasing the out breath, decreases the heart rate, which is the biological driver of anxiety and stress. So if you're feeling anxious and stressed, your body thinks it needs energy to run or fight, the fight and flight response. So if your body needs energy, it has to pump the oxygen and the glucose around the body, so the heart rate increases. So if we want to reduce stress and anxiety, we have to lower our heart rate. And that breathing technique, there's multiple different ways of doing it. But there's another one called the physiological sigh, which is simply 2 sharp breaths in through the nose and 1 long out breath. So for about 6 seconds.
You automatically feel chill.
Automatically feel chill, even with that one breath.
Yeah.
And the research shows that just one of those breaths reduces stress in real time. So if I feel stressed or anxious, that is the cue to implement the breathing technique. Sometimes I'm most chill when I'm going out on stage because I've done breathing for about 2 or 3 minutes. So it brings it down. So that's the breath is such a powerful, powerful tool. So if you struggle with any stress or anxiety, utilize that. And you can do that at any time of any day. The challenge is internalizing the practice, because people hear it, they have the knowledge, but knowledge is not where the game is played. The game is played in action. You've got to implement, you've got to execute. And if you do this on a consistent basis and bring it into your life, all of a sudden it's internalized and it just becomes what you do. So that is one of the most important things in my life, is that breathing technique. It's so important.
Okay.
So breathe, move. That's the second one, the basic I always go to. And connect is the last one. And connection is just like, we are emotional and social beings. We need other people. And it's just having connection in your life. And when you look at the neuroscience of connection, it's really interesting. There's some fascinating work in the neuroscience of connection. And some of the neural pathways in connection are heavily linked to an area related to gratitude as well. And it's called the raphe part of your brain. It's the raphe nucleus part of your brain. It's sort of in the back mid part of your brain there. And there's a pathway within there, or sort of a structure within there, they're calling the social homeostasis pathway. And what they notice is that if people are socially isolated or disconnected for a long time, that part of the brain releases dopamine. And people often think about dopamine as a pleasure neurotransmitter. Dopamine is really a motivational neurotransmitter. It motivates you to go and take action. Then it gives you the pleasure if you do that action, so you'll do it again in the future. That's what the reward is for. But basically that emits dopamine to drive you to go and connect with people. But that sort of turns into a craving. And some people, if they're not in tune with their body, they might think they need alcohol, food or something like that. So they go and fill up on junk food or alcohol because there's like a hole in their soul. Whereas they need to connect with other people. So we've got to develop and harness and foster and nurture good relationships with people that are going to lift you in your life. Friendship networks mixed with sport, as you said, go into groups and stuff like that. But foster those connections, because fundamentally, like if you look at Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases, even like diabetes and stuff like that, like really high level physical diseases, that connection and social ties is one of the biggest predictors for avoiding those challenges, physical and mental and emotional.
Okay. Goodness. What did you do your PhD in?
The PhD, I wish if I could go back, I'd do it in metabolic health, to be quite honest. That's my new rabbit hole. I'm obsessed with metabolic health and biochemistry and stuff. But I'd done it. It was a research PhD. So it was in the School of Psychology and in the Institute of Neuroscience within the School of Psychology. But what we were really looking at emotion-driven pathways to addictive tendencies. So I'm really interested in this idea of wanting more. We all want more in this consumer society. And I don't like getting political, but think of a capitalist culture. What's the capitalist culture want?
Sell.
Sell, but wants 100% addicts that buy, and consume. Whether it's tech industry, the tech industry is mad actually, because the tech industry and the drug industry, they're the only two businesses that call their customers users. It's interesting, isn't it? Users in the tech industry. So food, technology, we want more. And the tech industry is getting the best computer scientists in the world to hijack our brains to get more tech, more algorithms to spend more time in tech. The food industry is getting the best scientists to hijack the reward systems of the brain to consume more food. And that's just what's going on with addictions and stuff. So I was fascinated with addiction, but I was fascinated with this overarching want for more. And there is a part of the reward pathway within our brain as well, where we might like something, but if we continually implement or do that behavior or take that substance, that liking can be hijacked and become this wanting system. There's two sort of pathways. Liking can become wanting, and there's more of a craving behind that as well. And that can turn into a pathological craving where the reward systems are literally hijacked and you just want more. And I was fascinated by this because I just think we're consuming. And I think the reason why so many people want more, sometimes people just like something and they enjoy something and they do it. But for the most part, and for me, it was avoiding stress, anxiety, overwhelm, just avoiding life because it's so bloody hard and people are busy and wrecked all the time. So I think that's a big challenge for people. And if you drink alcohol, a couple of glasses of wine, and you feel less stressed, well, the more the better. So no wonder the so addiction is on the rise.
There's a lot of private addictions as well and dependencies on drugs and alcohol, and there's a lot of shame around dependency. So people don't want to admit it. Yeah. But there are people that, like you say, holding down jobs, raising families, but they're silently suffering.
Yeah. 20% of people in the workforce are addicted to a substance. That's what the new research shows.
What would you say to people that are worried about their dependency on, say, alcohol or drugs, and what's the first thing that they should do?
They need to tackle it as soon as they can, because once it becomes like a full-blown addiction, it's so hard to break, and the statistics on that are terrible. So I think what they have to do is they'll know what they're doing, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs. They'll know how they're doing it. Wine, bottle of whiskey, sex addiction, where there's loads of different addictions. They'll know what they're doing.
Whatever it is,
they'll know what they're doing and they'll know how they do it. They need to ask why. Why are they doing it? What's going on? Is there a lack of meaning? A lack of purpose? Is their life not where they wanted it to be? Is there childhood trauma? Are they just unhappy?
Are they stressed all the time?
Stressed all the time. Like what is so bad about their reality that they're trying to escape? Why are they using that substance? And I think that's the key.
Okay.
Would you know many people like in your work and stuff like that from, let's say, because I find addiction thrives in secrecy. And I think in middle class and upper class, it's sort of it's seen more as a moral weakness if you've been susceptible.
It is, and I suppose as well, like you say, there's an awful term that I hate, junkie.
Yeah.
And people just think of people that are dependent on drugs as, like you say, people on the side of the street, and they're mogging out and you can see them, and God help those individuals. It's desperate for them.
Yeah.
But it touches all parts of society. And you have people that think, oh, I just snort coke at the weekends and that's fine, and I can control it. But if you can't wait for Saturday night to come because that's the time that you let loose and you do snort that coke, then you have to think about the fact that why are you waiting? Why are you so excited to do that?
Yeah.
Is there a dependency there? You need to maybe question that, and like you say, try and figure out what it is that's driving you to do that as well. Isn't that right?
Yeah, definitely. Like if you're Monday to Friday so bad that you're waiting for Saturday, like that's a big chunk of your life there, Monday to Friday. Like that's living for the weekend. Like that's what we say,
Yeah.
So what is so bad about that? There's a thought experiment I was thinking about recently as well. I think is interesting. Like imagine we went through, like, let's say World War III, or electricity was gone. You see some crazy sci-fi kind of things, and all of a sudden there was a lot of poverty. Everyone was struggling, and it became like a bit of a war, like to get food and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, people that had lots of privilege and lots of money, let's say money was completely devalued and there was no way, the banking system broke down, all of a sudden it was just a free-for-all, and violence was the big driver. Well, I would imagine a lot of people that probably look down on junkies for making bad choices. Well, all of a sudden drugs might look a lot to escape your new reality. Drugs might look quite tempting. So it's like your circumstances are a huge factor when it comes to escapism and avoiding how you feel and taking drugs. That's the reality.
100%. And I always would say to people, before you judge someone, like I think that expression, although I'm not a very religious person, I always say, but for the grace of God go I, because you do not know what circumstances anyone has been brought up in, and sometimes drugs are literally the only way out for people to escape.
Yeah.
What awful circumstances that they've either grown up in, the childhood trauma they've had, or the life that they're currently living. And it's one of those really difficult things to tackle. But you're one of the really small percentages that have managed to come out of it.
So lucky.
It grips people and it gets them until they die.
Yeah.
Or until something awful happens to them, doesn't it?
Yeah. And they die
what
earlier.
What is the percentage for?
Oh God, it's very difficult because if basically Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, it's anonymous, so by default you can't get the stats of that. And anecdotally, I don't think the stats look good. You hear different numbers. If you got people going into a treatment centre, like you hear some treatment centres saying they have a 40% success rate, but that they're abstinent after 3 months, 1 month, a year, 2 years. What's the metric? What's the metric of abstinent?
Yeah,
I would say the metric of people abstinent after 3 to 5 years. And the metric for me is they're happy. They're not wanting to use drugs. The reason why I'm not worried about going back into addiction, because I've nothing to escape. My life is so damn good today. What the hell? Like, I love my life. I love waking up. I love life. So, like, I wouldn't even, I don't even want to use drugs and even to, like, bend that reality, because I want to be in the life I'm in today. So it's the opposite of wanting to go into addiction. That's why I call myself recovered. But I would say the stats will be as low as definitely single digits, and I would say low single digits of people happy in long-term recovery.
Would you ever be worried if something awful happened in your life, or you suffered a big grief experience or anything like that you might go back? Or do you think that you're resilient enough? I
think that I'm resilient enough. I can cope with a lot of things. Like, I've had some crazy things happening that I was just able to laugh off. Like, 2 years of PhD research wiped out in an instant with COVID. And I remember smiling, thinking, "Isn't this amazing? The way this doesn't bother me." It was like a good thing. I was like, I seen it as a good thing.
How did it get wiped out?
I had 60 people through a mindfulness program that were in a long term, or in a just. They were doing a 8-week mindfulness program just after they came out of a recovery centre, but we were measuring like impulsivity, anxiety, depression levels at baseline, and we are going to do this predictive machine learning algorithm to look at predictors. But if we needed another 60 to go through for it to have sufficient statistical power for the analysis, but if we put another 60 through, COVID changed the baseline. So we wouldn't have been measuring anxiety generalised, we'd be measuring COVID anxiety, and it just would have been a confounder within the whole experiment.
And you just smiled and went, isn't
I
this
remember
amazing?
smiling, and the same week I was supposed to be
Jesus,
on
better,
yeah.
stronger person than me.
Well, the same week I was supposed to be on the Late Late Show for my book, and I still haven't had a book launch because my book
Listen,
never
if
even
anyone
got.
here from Morty's, listen, will you get this chap on for his book launch? Retrospective book
launch. But again, I was saying, like, what can I do? What is my control? And I think that's important as well for people to recognise. One of the biggest things, one of the biggest tools in my life, that I just say to myself, right, what can I control right now? It's not external factors. It's not what other people say, what other people do. It's what I say, what I do, how I respond to challenging situations. That is what I can control. And I think pulling it back to those basics is really, really important.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned earlier was this drive for more, for more, for more. And I know maybe from an evolutionary point of view, humans have always needed to be wanting more and more and more so we could progress.
Yeah.
And I suppose become not better people, but more innovative, more technology, better vaccines, more medicine, more research, etc. But I do think that the journey to the end goal is actually better than the end goal, because you often hear of people, even, really wealthy business people or whatever, and they're like, yeah, once you get that big payday, it's like, oh, all right, so,
yeah,
what do I do tomorrow type thing. Whereas it's the journey, it's that striving for whatever it is that you think you might want. You may have a goal, or it may not even be tangible, but you're. What is the science behind that? What's the neuroscience in the brain, the way that works? Because I find that really interesting.
That's fascinating. I think what's going on fundamentally, what they're saying is that I can't be happy until I have this thing. Whereas things don't bring you happiness. It's the everyday actions. It's the process that brings you the happiness. That's the key. Yeah. And I think from a neuroscientific level, like it taps into so many different aspects of our brains. But like, we want to have, if you think of what it is to be joyful, if you think of what it is to be purpose driven, like, what is it to love and like something, to be motivated for these things, to have energy? And I think, like, the reality is that neuroscience, I don't think, can very accurately assess these things. It's just not there yet. But what you need to have is like a level of dopamine in your brain, where, because that's the motivational neurotransmitter. So if you like things and you love what you're doing and it's driving you towards doing that. But serotonin is certain neurotransmitter. It's mostly associated with depression. People say there's a lack of serotonin is causes depression, but that's not true. Like, a lack of aspirin doesn't cause a headache, but might fix a headache, doesn't cause a headache. So I think it's different ways of looking at it. Definitely serotonin plays a role. And I often think of dopamine like the pleasure neurotransmitter, if that's what you want to call it. If you're chasing that nugget, you're chasing that thing that's going to make you happy, when you get there, it's not going to give you sustained dopamine levels for the rest of your life. It'll give you that burst, that high. But the reality of dopamine is, like, what goes up must come down. People often think if they do something good, it releases dopamine and it feels good, but dopamine doesn't come back down the baseline. It drops back under, like a pendulum swinging from side to side, or a seesaw. It goes back low. So it's called the pleasure-pain balance. So when you experience a lot of pleasure, you will experience a similar corresponding pain. So chasing pleasures, like pleasure, pain, love, hate, these polarized things, that's not where it's at. What we need to find is fulfillment and joy. And I think serotonin, which is the more present moment neurotransmitter, that's where it plays a role. And what we back to, nature, connection, the process, meaningful work, helping other people. Like, if you want to feel better, go and help someone. Like, I talked about gratitude earlier. Gratitude, what a super powerful thing. Gratitude lives with other people. Like, I have a 1 minute gratitude practice every morning. I visualize time with my loved ones, nostalgic, purposeful meanings where I embody the feelings, and I'm literally trying to inject serotonin into my brain, because that's the gratitude neurotransmitter.
So what are you doing? You're sitting there and you're thinking, my amazing mum, my dad, my girlfriend, or what are you thinking?
So I don't do that because that's just a list and you'll run through that. So I'll pick one particular thing. I'll give you an example. So do you remember the event I had at the Helix Theatre?
What an event, Brian.
What it was
That was like unbelievable.
unbelievable, right?
You had the crowd just.
It was mad.
You know that feeling that you get when you're in
I'm getting
a group.
goosebumps just thinking about
the
that.
feeling you get when you're in a group setting and there's lots of people and you know they're kind of feeling the same as you are.
Yeah.
And the hairs are standing up on your arms, and just everyone in the room. Is it love? Is it gratitude? Is it corny? Who knows? But it's just great, isn't it?
It was the feeling in the room, and what made that feeling in the room. Like I'm a motivational speaker. If that, I don't like that word, but I'm a keynote speaker. I do lots of keynote talks for corporates and different things, and I love it. I've never forgot my lines in my life. But at the Helix Theatre, my ma was there for the first time. I went completely blank. So for anyone that wasn't there, I had to go off stage. And while I was off stage, lots of people don't know this. My little nephew was there. He's only 7 years of age. His name is Aaron. Gorgeous little kid. He's such a little character. And he said to me, sister, I want to go back to Brian. And she says, why? He says, I want to give him a hug.
Ah, God.
So he came back and gave me a hug while I was doing my breathing technique to lower down the nervous system response. And I remember, and so what I do, back to the gratitude practice, I would pick one moment in my life. So that's one that I go back to. I'll picture Aaron walking up to me in the corridor behind the thing, give me a hug, and I'll feel it and I'll embody it and the smells, the sounds, I really go into that moment. So it could be with your mum, it could be with your gran, it could be a time, but really go into the physical experience of what that was like and just spend a minute there and really, really feel it. That's what a way to kick off your day, a minute of that.
And then a few breathing exercises, then a workout, and then you're done. Then you're ready for the day, yeah?
Then you're ready for the day. I actually have a technique. So this is what I do every morning. It's non-negotiable for me. It's a morning routine, 3-minute morning routine. I call it my bag technique. So I used to do a different kind of bag back in the day. in the morning, a bag that didn't serve me.
I'm sure you did.
My bag today is a minute of breath work, a minute of affirmations, and a minute of gratitude. We chatted about the breath work. We chatted about the gratitude just there. The affirmations is a verbal statement of intent. And there's something really powerful in that, because I would have thinking I was quite woo-woo back in the day, but I remember looking at the research around this, and like the research shows that language is a vehicle for emotion. If you tell yourself you're a piece of crap every single day, you're going to feel like a piece of crap, and the research backs this up. It's a beautiful scientific theory that goes into this. It's very complex, so I won't go into the details of it. It's called relational frame theory for anyone that's interested. But it basically shows that emotions and psychological functions travel through language. So have a verbal statement of intent to feed yourself in the morning. That's really, really powerful, and that can be really golden, you know.
So what kind of thing is that then? Give me an affirmation.
Give you an affirmation. So there's a guy I know, do you know Neil O'Murcu? He's a breathwork instructor, great guy, a really good friend of mine.
I look, all these people you've mentioned, I want to read all their books, do all their courses. But I don't have the fucking time.
that's the challenge we face, isn't it?
I know.
But Neil,
I'm going to get a job as a delivery driver for Camille now, right? And I'm going to listen to all the audio
there
books,
you
right?
go, yeah. And you're done and dusted. You get €6 an hour, and I think it might probably up to €8 these days.
Maybe. Actually, do you know what? $12.50 is minimum wage.
Is
so
it?
I'd say that, yeah.
Happy days. But Neil's mother-in-law lived with the family. Gaga, her name was, right? That was the nickname they had. I can't remember her name, what she called herself. She obviously didn't call herself Gaga, but she was supposed to be a trailblazer back in the 60s, went to London, started her own business when women didn't really do that from Ireland back then, and she was a real trailblazer, supposed to be an incredible woman. And she had this mantra: I'm Gaga, I'm strong, I can cope with anything. And unfortunately, she passed away last year, and in her last 24 hours, she was in the house, in Neil's house, and I'll never forget this story. And in the last 24 hours, she was on end-of-life meds, that kind of thing. She never really came out of consciousness, except for one time. When she came out of consciousness, she says, I'm Gaga, I'm strong, I can cope with anything.
Wow.
Went back asleep and died a few hours later. That's become my new mantra, and I've said it every morning since I heard that story. I'm Brian, I'm strong, I can cope with anything. And again, it's not just saying it, it's embodying it. And usually for me, I do it for a minute, so I usually get about 12 or 13 in. I usually count it. I haven't got a timer going on, so it's just don't try to perfect this. Done is better than perfect. Just try to do it 10, 15 times. but you start to feel the words more as you get into the fifth and sixth time of saying it. But try to embody it, trying to feel it. I'm Brian, I'm strong, I can cope with anything. I'm Laura, I'm strong, I can cope with anything. Powerful mantra, it really is.
It really is.
Yeah.
Wow. Brian, is there anything that I've missed in the questions that I've asked you or the things that we've discussed about that you'd like people to know about before we wrap up?
There's one other small tool. It's not a small tool. It's a huge tool that's massively important in my life, and it's a framework to make decisions by, and it's truly one of the biggest drivers in my life. Like, people often think they know what's important in their life, but do they really know what's important in your life at the level of awareness rather than knowledge? And I've reflected on this. I know what my values are. Like, I've multiple different values. We talked about wanting more. Like, kaizen is this Japanese term for seeking never-ending improvement. That's a value of mine. Boldness is a value of mine. I love putting myself out there in the world and taking a risk and a chance.
A bit naughty.
Yeah, a bit naughty, a bit cheeky, a bit bold, like, you know. But multiple different things: gratitude, flexibility, psychological flexibility. But I've 3 core values, and I want people to think about that as well. Pick 3 core values. What are the 3 important values in your life? Mine are energy, health, relationships. They're my 3 core values. So get people to think about, for anyone out there, have a think about what's important to you. Family's usually a big one because the connection's so important. Health is obviously a big one as well. But what's important in your life? Maybe it's your job. Maybe you're ambitious is a big thing for you. But what's it for you specifically, right? But then think about how you make decisions around that, because most people don't do that. Most people will say, oh, my family and kids are so important, but they're working 60 hours a week. There's friction, there's misalignment there. And it's this dichotomy, this differentiation between values-based decisions and feelings-based decisions that will determine someone's success in life, both personally and professionally. I make values-based decisions. So if I come home from work, I might feel stressed and a bit overwhelmed. I might feel like binging on Netflix for a few hours. For someone else, they might feel like having a bottle of wine or 2. But they value their health. So are they going to make a feelings-based decision or a values-based decision? Go for a run, walk the dog, call a friend.
Okay, so when you're feeling something, you're more inclined to maybe not choose something on the basis of your values. So you need to actually really understand what your values are and then...
Yeah, and I'm not talking about gut intuition or instinct, like they trump everything else. I'm talking about the feelings that come from the challenges of life: anxiety, fear, anger, resentment,
rage.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you might feel like screaming at your kids, but you value their relationship and you value their personal growth. So do you make a feelings-based decision or a values-based decision? You might...
bollocks, now I feel guilty because today I couldn't find my keys coming up, and one of my sons couldn't find his key, and he was given out to me and I was given out to him. And if I had made my decision based on my values, I would have said, listen, honey, it's fine, we'll sort it out, instead of going, stop your crying. Okay.
And it's hard.
I can rectify that.
Some of these things are reflexive. You just but you know what the thing is, Laura, right? Imagine you were 30% less busy. Imagine you had your nervous system levels were a little bit lower, like you'd be less likely to be reactive, you know, that way. So there's elements of that as well, you know. So you might feel like for me, I need...
Brian, would you just come and live with me now for a little while, right? Follow me around my house and get into the car with me and drive around me, and keep saying that, Laura, 30%. Now, come on, how can you be 30% less busy?
Well, I need someone for me too. I'm not doing it either.
It's great to talk about these things, but actually, you are right, and we do need to make those decisions to make time for the important things in life, because, you know, I always say, what's it going to say in your tombstone? Beloved wife and mother and daughter and all that. It's not going to say, oh, you did this and that and the other thing. Sure, it's not.
It's not going to say
that. It's going to
that.
be in how you made people feel, not about on what you did for people, really.
Yeah. Maya Angelou's quote is brilliant, isn't it? People don't remember what you say or what you do. They remember how you make them feel.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. And there's a line I heard one time I thought was really, really powerful. The only people that remember the late emails you sent, the work you did, the presentation that you did in 20 years' time is your kids. Like, they're the only people that are going to remember that because they missed out. Like, nobody that you work with is going to remember these things. Your kids are going to remember these things. All of the extra work that you've done. And that really sits with me. And I think we need to get a grip of that. Like, I found myself recently with my stepdaughter hiding my phone. She says, "Are you working again?" And I'd be hiding my phone. And I have her now this weekend actually for a big day. And she says, "What do you want to do?" And she says, "I don't mind, just no devices."
Oh.
I don't spend much time on my device.
Yeah.
So what is it like for other kids? So I think we need to,
Yeah.
what are we doing? What are the choices
Yeah.
we're making? We really need, like, you might feel like going on your phone. What do you value? This feelings values thing is really, really important. Really important.
This is the biggest takeaway I've had now from this podcast, actually.
It's a monster.
Yeah.
It's a monster. It really is. And one thing I've noticed, like, I made a lot of feelings-based choices in my life. I felt anxious. I done drugs. Easy choices, hard life. And that's it. They're the easy choices. Having a bottle of wine, it's an easy choice. Having the chocolate, easy choice. Not going to the gym, easy choice. Much harder life. But if you make the values-based decisions, having those difficult conversations, not going on your phone, eating healthy food, preparing your food, not getting angry and sort of taking a breath, harder choices, much easier life. And it was a groundbreaking concept when I sort of heard about this in different ways, and it's just something I really, really try to live by.
Oh God, I could talk to you all day. I think we'll have to get you back.
I'd loved it. I really would.
Brian, I have 2 questions that I ask everybody in my podcast. So what advice would you give young people today?
Oh my God, it's actually simple. Get off your phones. You've got to get off your phones. It is rewiring their brains. And I'm so scared for young people's futures. I was in I'm doing a TV documentary at the moment. It's around addiction, and we were doing it on young kids with phones recently. And I went into my old school in St. Declan's, where I done my secondary school. And I said to the kids, I says, have you ever seen something on your phone that you wish you could unsee? And the amount of them that said they seen someone committing suicide on their phones through crazy TikTok videos and stuff like that, and they can't unsee it. I'm like, what are they actually looking at? And I done a test. I said to them, it says, if anyone could not have a phone, if nobody had phones, would you choose not to have a phone? And the amount of them that put their hands up, they don't want to have a phone, but they feel you have to have a phone because everyone else has a phone. So what I would say to kids is just try to get off your phones. But another thing I'd say as well, and this advice I wish I could give given myself as a kid as well, is just acknowledge your feelings and share them with someone else. And we're back to connection there as well. I think that's really, really important. Share how you feel. That's really, really important.
What's the meaning of life, Brian?
What is the meaning of life? I think in one word, and it's very, very corny, I'm a bit apprehensive to say, but I think I will say, I think the meaning of life is love. And I think whatever that is, I think it's like to feel and to live, to feel as much as you can of that joy, to help other people's connection comes into it as well, belonging comes into it. But I think it's to give as much as you can to other people with the most you have, because you're gonna get it all back as well. I think the energy and the connection of life, that's what it does, karma, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's love, and it's do with the giving and the taking of life. I think that's the meaning of life.
Oh, Brian, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for your time.
Likewise, Laura. Loved it.